Okay, in true pharmacy style, can we all just sort of, it might be, if you wouldn't mind, just sort of coming into the centre, then might sort of help the conversation, I guess. So this session is about optimising medicines, and firstly, if I introduce the people involved. On the far left there, we have Paula Tully, who's the Director for Established Products at Pfizer. Clare Howard, who's Deputy Chief Pharmaceutical Officer at NHS England. And myself, I'm Keith Ridge. I am Chief Pharmaceutical Officer at NHS England. So I'll just press this and hope the first slide comes on, or even that one. There you go. Right. Somebody said, the way this is going to work, by the way, is we're just going to do about, I'm going to do a few opening comments, about 5 minutes, maybe 6, I don't know. Then we're going to have 2 short presentations, one about 7 minutes, and one even might be a bit shorter than that. When I was asked to do this, somebody said to me, could you just tell us what medicines optimisation is, please? So I thought I'd start there in terms of what I sort of feel some of the elements are. So I want you to imagine a 51-year-old overweight man, I don't know if you can see one anywhere, who may have been diagnosed with high blood pressure for the first time. And in a sort of world of medicines optimisation, my general practitioner and myself, or maybe the practice nurse and myself, will discuss what that means and what I need to do, and where I can find support and information. I've discussed the various treatment options, particularly, but not just medicines, but particularly medicines. And we have decided what awaits me and what suits me in my life. I go to the pharmacy, and I get those dispensed for the first time, and they too offer me support. In fact, the sort of pharmacist and his or her team and the general practice more broadly work closely together. And over the years, I get to feel that they are very much part of my team as I sort of manage my blood pressure. But as I get older and things start to fail, including my kidneys, so the dose of my tablets has to be decreased because I can't get rid of the medicine from my body and my blood as quickly as I used to. And the last thing I want to do is fall over and break my hip because my blood pressure is too low. And perhaps actually a new drug would be better because that will suit me better. But then other diseases set in, and me and my team decide that more pills, and that team's now got some specialist support with it too, both pharmacy and medicine and nursing. But then as I get older, we all sort of decide some of those medicines, I don't really need 10 medicines. And actually, I want to reduce those. And we start reducing them. Now, I guess that's a bit of an ideal story, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen. And indeed, in a world where medicines remain the most common therapeutic intervention, they're certainly the biggest expenditure after staff in the NHS, some £14 billion a year now, and about 1 billion prescriptions a year dispensed in primary care alone. But the reality is, at least the literature tells us, and I've seen it from my own practice, and I'm sure many others have too, that 30 to 50% of patients don't take medicines as intended. They have insufficient supporting information. There's a whole raft of literature which suggests that, in fact demonstrates it. And that 5 to 8%, up to 8% of all hospital admissions in this country are due to the mainly preventable adverse effects of medicines. Errors happen across sectors, from children through to care home residents and everything in between. And the level of error is at an unacceptable level. We waste medicines. pure waste, a study done by the Department of Health a couple of years ago now, just pure waste, not that people aren't taking them properly, but pure waste, £300 million a year in primary care. There's relatively little understanding in terms of what happens in real clinical practice, as opposed to getting a medicine through the clinical trial process. What happens in the real world? And what about the topical thing at the moment, and something we should all be concerned about, the appropriate utilisation of antibiotics. So if we're going to do this better, and Clare and Paula will explain more, if we're going to get improved quality, improved value, improved outcomes for patients and the public from this approach, what I call medicines optimisation, but optimising the use of medicines, then in my view, we need a new level of patient and public engagement about their medicines as part of their overall care, a level not previously seen. A level of collaboration between professions, and indeed the same profession, but across professions, and a level of that across sectors, again, not previously seen. And that needs to be knitted together, in my view, with an enhanced level of patient-centred professionalism, and an enhanced and transparent and value-for-money approach to partnership working overall. What do I mean by partnership? I mean all of those who play a part in improving outcomes, improving quality, and that includes the pharmaceutical industry. I think the pharmaceutical industry are moving towards a position where outcomes are as important to them as they are to everybody else, and working in partnership with the industry is an important part of this work. And overall, a change in approach to medicines and their use across the whole system, but as Bruce Keogh would say, importantly demonstrating improvement through measurement and metrics, and that needs to be transparent to all. So that's all I'm going to say at the moment. I'm going to hand over to Clare, who's going to take you through some of what's happened so far.
Thank you, Keith. Okay, so my job in real life, and I guess over the next 5 minutes, is to take you from the sort of policy context, if you like, right through to, well, so what? What does that mean for a patient coming into a pharmacy receiving a medicine? I've got about 5 minutes to do that this morning. I'm hoping I'll get a little bit longer in the day job. So, just to start right at the sort of strategic level, if you like, the policy context, the first time we heard the term medicines optimisation was in the paper that the coalition government put together, and they said there, pharmacists working with doctors and other healthcare professionals have an important and expanding role in optimising the use of medicines and supporting better health. So for all the reasons that Keith just described, the waste, the huge spend, and the fact that patients really aren't getting the best value for money, we needed a key change in the way that we were looking and working with patients around the way they use their medicines. And medicines optimisation has become the term to describe that work. So in May of last year, the Royal Pharmaceutical Society worked with a number of patient groups and a number of royal colleges so that different professions were involved, and with the pharmaceutical industry to say, well, we need to define this a little bit better so people understand what that means on the ground. And the principles that they published last May, they're not rocket science. Essentially what they say is start with the patient. First and foremost, aim to understand the patient's experience. So there's little point prescribing a tablet that says one to be taken after breakfast if we haven't had a conversation with the patient that says, do you actually have breakfast? And those sorts of very fundamental things are where we need to start with this. Obviously, the choice of drug is really important, and those of us that are pharmacists spend a lot of time working with prescribers to make sure they understand what the studies actually say about the medicines, so that neither the prescriber or the patient have unrealistic expectations of those medicines. And hopefully we can work with patients to sort of meet the medicines halfway. So statins and other medicines, yes, they will prevent your heart attack or your stroke or go some way to doing that, but actually there are things that we need the patients to start to think about to sort of meet the medicines halfway, if you like. Keith's mentioned some of the problems we have around medication safety, and first and foremost our responsibility, particularly as pharmacists, is to make sure that we keep the patient safe. And as Keith's already alluded to, there are issues there that we need to work on, and so ensuring medicines use is as safe as possible is critical. And then finally, making all of this, thinking about all of this in the round, rather than perhaps what's gone before, where we think about prescribing or dispensing, or at some point we think about, will the patient actually take the medicine, that we think about this in the round every time we think about medicines as an intervention. So where are we with all of this work then? Well, I think where we've got to, Keith and I have worked across with pharmacists and doctors across the NHS to ensure that people understand this, that people grasp that where we are now is not acceptable, that we're not getting value for money out of that 14 billion that we spend on money, and patients are being shortchanged because they're not getting the best out of their medicines. And I think that concept now is really understood. But I think the point we're at now is, well, so what? What are we going to do about it? The Royal Pharmaceutical Society principles have been signed off, and NHS England is supportive of those, and we're now working to develop the so what, the strategy of how we're going to make that a difference at patient level. The pharmaceutical industry have worked in very close collaboration with us, and for those in the room that aren't familiar, that's fairly new. The NHS and the industry sitting down to tackle a problem together actually is relatively new. We've tended to come at it from our different perspectives, but not really sat down and said, actually, we're both aiming for the same thing here, which is to get the most out of medicines. I'm under enormous pressure to get a strategy out and tell people the so what, but I've been absolutely clear from coming into this role that actually we need to sit down and engage with patients first before we do that. And Bruce talked this morning in his opening speech about how do we actually engage with patients so that we do that right from the beginning, so that the end product, if you like, the change that we get has been driven by patients, or I think he may have even said our customers, right from the start. And I think it's fair to say we're all learning how to do that. I am in no way an expert. I'm learning, and I may make some really big mistakes around this work, but learning how to sit and talk to patients to say, what should services be like for you to help you get the most out of your medicines? So we have a big engagement event in November, but that's only the beginning. That's the start of how we work with patients to ensure that this strategy is meaningful for them. We have been asked to look at, well, okay, Claire, if you've been able to deliver medicines optimisation, what will it look like in 3 years' time? So we are starting to think about some of the things we could measure, and again, that was mentioned in Bruce's talk this morning. But now what we need to do is make sure that we implement this right across the system, that this isn't just a strategy that sits on a shelf somewhere, that this actually happens every time a patient has an interaction with a doctor or a nurse or a pharmacist or whoever around their medicines. And it'll require a level of collaboration, as Keith said, that is unprecedented, I think. And for us as pharmacists, I think we have a leading role in this, but we can't fix all of this ourselves. There are many, many players in this to make it happen. One of the key players in actually resolving some of these issues is the community pharmacist. And I'm often quite surprised, I started out as a community pharmacist, how little people understand about the role of a community pharmacist. So just for a moment, I'll just spell out a couple of things that are probably worth saying. Almost 1 billion prescription items are written in this country every year and dispensed in the community by community pharmacists. Currently, 99% of the population are within 20 minutes travel of a community pharmacy, and 84% of adults visit a pharmacy each year. And there are about 1.6 million visits to a pharmacy every single day. So in terms of improving health, they have a massive role to play. And I'd just like to describe one area where I think we had the beginnings of how we could make this work. So NHS England has been set a target, if you like, or we have an ambition that we will reduce premature mortality from respiratory disease. We'll stop people from dying early from a disease that actually largely, if we worked with the patients and supported them better, they could be prevented. When I worked in South Central in 2010, we already had the beginnings of some work that told us that if we asked community pharmacists to support patients to use their inhalers better, then actually we could get much better value and they could be at home and not being admitted to hospital. We rolled that out across a geography of about 7% of the population in England. And that work was, so here the pharmacist sat down with the patient and absolutely ensured that they knew how to use their inhaler. And when I say patients have a problem with using their inhalers, actually about 94% of healthcare professionals don't know how to use inhalers properly. So there was a huge training burden to this. But actually the benefits you can see there, it was independently evaluated. And we showed that patients demonstrated that this work improved their outcomes and their quality of life. People described, I can now breathe more easily. At the health system level, we actually were able to demonstrate a reduction in emergency admissions. We used an innovative IT solution, so I could sit at my desk and I could see that that year almost 5,000 patients received that intervention, and I could see what was happening to their smoking levels and to their asthma control scores. And in educational terms, it enhanced the skills to all professionals, practice nurses, GPs and pharmacists who are working with those patients to try and ensure that they use their medicines better. So I think that's the beginning of a story of how we could do it. What we now have to do is put that into practice. Thank you.
Thank you. So good morning everybody, it's great to be here. My name's Paula Tully, and I head up the Established Products BU at Pfizer. I'm a new face to pharmacy. I moved over to this role January of this year, and the Pharmacist is a critical and important customer for us and partner within the business that I operate in. As I stand here today, I'm representing Pfizer and very much, I believe, representing the industry when I talk about medicine optimisation. This is an area that we've worked significantly within and very much been involved in the positioning of the ABPI position of medicines optimisation. And that's very much aligned to the RPS principles, the 4 key principles being 1, patient understanding, 2, evidence-based choice, 3, compliance and adherence to safety, and 4, making medicines optimisation live, making it happen, seeing this tactically happen out there in the UK. I think the other thing to say is, well, why am I here? Well, I represent industry, I represent Pfizer. We are developers, makers of medicines, and it's incredibly important that we see that medicines are optimised and used appropriately, that patients get the best out of their medicines, that patients have informed choice. And I really do believe personally within the topic of medicines optimisation that this is a real topic where I really think there's a common agenda from an industry perspective, from a pharmacy perspective, from a multidisciplinary perspective, from an NHS perspective, and from a patient perspective, because the patient is very much in the heart of this, making choices along the way. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I've just got 2 slides to share a little bit about some of the things that we've been doing within the realms of MO. So before my arrival in 2012, the BU that I work within really did sort of seize the baton within this area and really wanted to live and breathe medicines optimisation and partner with their key customer, the pharmacist at the time. And many of you, or maybe some of you, not all of you, will be aware of this campaign that we rolled out in 2012. It was a very simple idea, not clever really, in the sense of it was about targeting the patient and trying to get the patient to go to their pharmacist, and targeting the pharmacist to talk to their patient under the banner of medicines optimisation. And it was very successful, and one measure internally, we have a web portal site where we gain new customers who want to talk to Pfizer through the Pfizer and pharmacy channels. Over that time, that increased in noise level around 60%. So it was an incredibly noisy but productive time. We got around 3.2 million touch points. That's through media, medical, social media, radio, interviews. It was a very, very successful campaign. We're going to roll that out again in November. We're learning from last year. We're developing it now much more to the pharmacist and his or her team. So the language is slightly more expanded. We're rolling it out to Wales. There are a few more measures within this campaign as we move forward. And I think it really does touch on those 4 key principles of 1, patient at the centre, patient understanding, 2, having the dialogue about choice, 3, safety, and 4, making this live and breathe and work. We're also involved with pharmacists across the UK on various projects, whether that be to reduce A&E admissions or whether it be to simplify repeat prescriptions for key patients. But we like to partner and work and see how we can make this system work better, and it's very, very important to us. So really my final slide is just to say, you know, we're here today and it's all about moving forward. Very much at Pfizer, we believe that we're partners in working together for Britain's national health. We believe that we only change the world working together in collaboration, working with pharma, working with the NHS, working with patient groups, working with multidisciplinary teams, healthcare professionals. All of this together is what drives outcome. And the patient very much is in the centre and at the heart of that. And I believe collaboration is the essence, and the power of success is bringing great minds together. And it's great to be here today to put forward our thoughts and now to hear your thinking about how we can work better together and really make this a success. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Paula and Claire. I know there are members of the patients' jury here, people's jury even, and I'd like to give people who represent the jury to have sort of first chance about what questions you'd like to ask us, and then let's see if we can generate a bit of a discussion. I think we're due to finish at 1:45, I think. Yeah. 10:35. Okay. Okay.
Right, morning, my name's Ray Funnell. I'm a cardiac patient, so I'm actually on warfarin. I actually self-test now, but I have to pass the information back to the nurse. One thing I haven't been told is, and I found this out through my own research, no one can actually give me a complete list of what foods or anything that I can take or I should avoid. I've asked my clinic, nurse, no, I haven't got a list of it. It's only through research that I can actually say, well, I can't have cranberry juice, I can't have grapefruit, I can't take aspirin. I can't eat a lot of liver or certain greens. Is there anything that can be done about that? And also the fact that the other thing as well is, I think more should be done by the GPs to actually say, right, if you're going on, or even consultants, if you're on this long term, like I'm on it for the rest of my life, you should be sat down and explained right at the very beginning what this is going to mean to the patient.
Yeah. Claire, do you want to say first?
Can I just, have you asked your pharmacist for that list of medicines? Because we have what's called medicines information, and they routinely produce those sorts of documents that we could be able to get out to you fairly easily.
Why should I ask my pharmacist when I was given this by the GP and I'm under a warfarin clinic?
Well,
they should be the ones, surely they should be the ones that should actually be producing the list, not the pharmacist. The pharmacist dispenses the tablets based on the prescription that was written by the doctor.
But I guess that's what we're trying to get to in medicines optimisation. The pharmacist has a huge amount more that they could provide to the patient, and most pharmacists would have that information quite routinely. And it is actually our job when you have the medicine. Yes, the decision about what medicine is taken is sort of slightly upstream, but it is our job then to work with you so that you can take that medicine as well as you can. And the example I used about the inhaler was, it proved exactly that. Where we linked the patient and the pharmacist together, the patient then was able to get much better benefit. So we can provide that sort of information. That's exactly what pharmacists could and should be doing.
Either tomorrow or Monday, I'll go and speak to my pharmacist.
If
they can't produce it,
I'll
get back in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it should be also done if the clinic is actually dealing with patients on a daily basis.
Paula, do you want to add?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, if I was sitting there and I was you, I would be feeling like you're feeling and incredibly frustrated. Just a comment to say, I know from an industry perspective, and this is a general comment, so much information within that realm is provided. And it's interesting that, you know, there you sit and you say you haven't got that information, and I think this is coming back to the point. It's not about the information, it's about the teams working together, it's about the role of the pharmacist and the multidisciplinary team sharing that information, because there's a block at the moment, and it's not necessarily, the information is probably sitting on a shelf somewhere. It's the facilitation that's not going on. So just a comment, really.
Yeah.
I think this also goes back to the whole theme of this two-day conference and actually involving patients and carers on the people's panel, as it's actually now being called. We want more involvement right from the beginning.
Yeah, first of all, my view on this is I couldn't agree more. you know, to take the specific medicine you're taking, so warfarin is an important medicine. You'll know very well it's potent. You have to sort of keep it within certain limits, and it's an important medicine for you and your life. And the fact that you can't, or nobody has explained that to you, my own personal view would be, or hasn't explained the information you want, is just not acceptable, actually. And therefore, because it might mean, for example, that you will not take the medicine anymore as one consequence of that. Or you might sort of think, well, I think some people might well do that, and in many ways, the ability to be able to tailor information for an individual patient's needs and what they want from their clinician, in the broadest sense of that word, is really important. Now, I suspect that information is somewhere, and therefore, you just need to be signposted to it.
I think going on what you were saying, that obviously people would stop taking the medicine. I don't think that would happen, but what it does do is, once you're on warfarin, it changes your life completely, because you've got different things you've got to think about. Oh, I can't do this, or I can't do that. If I get a bruise, I've got to be careful. If I go to the dentist, I've got to be careful. There's a lot of things.
My mum takes it, and I completely get what you're saying.
I had a stroke in 2009. In all that time, I don't think any doctor, any nurse, or even a pharmacist has ever sat me down and said, "These are the medications, and this is how you take them, and this is what they do." It's not at all, for me, it's not been at all transparent. I just wonder if there's any comments that any of you would like to make about that.
Start again, Clare.
I mean, that's really, really sad to hear. You know, my father-in-law's had exactly your experience, and actually I was quite surprised at how little information he got right at the beginning to explain actually what the medicines do and could prevent in the future. We are working with community pharmacists in particular, because they're so accessible to patients, so that you can go in with all your medicines and have what's called a medicines use review. So you can go in, there's now a consultation area, so you can do it in complete sort of privacy, sit down with the pharmacist, say, right, these are all the tablets, I've no idea what this one says, no one's ever explained this one, and the pharmacist can sit and work through all of those with you. Because actually it's completely unrealistic from us to expect people to take their medicines as they were prescribed if we don't explain to what each one's for and the relative benefits of each of those. And it's only when people have that information that they can then make a choice and say, I absolutely must take my warfarin because I know that one's really important. And we're just not having, I guess that's exactly what we're trying to do here, we're not having those sorts of conversations with patients all the way through every time. Some patients get a really good service, but we can't sit here hand on heart and say every patient in the country has a serious thing that happens to them, as you did, gets the sort of service that we would like to see, and that's exactly the point behind this work. So I hope maybe in 3 or 4 years' time we could sit here and more patients who've experienced a stroke receive that service and understand what their medicines are there to do.
Claire, can I just follow on from that? How many members of the public actually know that they can actually go to their pharmacist and actually take all their medicines with them, sit in a private little room and go through it with them?
Not
many?
Enough, I guess, would be.
Can I put this out to the rest of the audience here? Do you know of any patients that can actually go and do that? Are you aware of anything?
Yes, absolutely.
I think that
that's the thing.
I think I mean there are people here who might want to comment on that and who sort of represent community pharmacy, but I again agree with you in that there is much more to be done about making sure that people are aware of the services that are available, whether it's in pharmacies or elsewhere. I'm aware that individual groups of pharmacies do try to advertise to some extent, but there's not much on national TV, for example, or the like. So I tend to agree. You wanted to ask a question?
Hi, I think the comments have been really helpful. Thank you for those. I think I agree. I think I'm talking about it maybe slightly secondhand. My wife's a community pharmacist, and I think a lot needs to be done in partnership with the general practitioner, because the general practitioner actually signposts the patients from the surgery that she serves to say, will you go and take all of your medications and take them to the pharmacist and talk them through, because rightly or wrongly, GPs don't have the time to do that. There's also something called a new medicines service. So if you've been started on a new medication, then you can go and speak to your pharmacist about what that medication is for, what are the side effects. Once again, I agree. I think the profile for that needs to be raised, because if people aren't aware, that service is going to be severely underutilised. But I think, and I guess this is a little bit about what this conference is about. It's raising awareness so that people are taking this back, and GPs, I think collectively GPs, pharmacists, healthcare professionals, nurses and doctors are all taking collective responsibility for a service that is available and could benefit a lot of people. Just a second thing, just to ask a question to Clare, if I may. My wife, working in pharmacy, for the medicine use reviews that she does, or the new medicine service reviews that she does, she probably gets very little feedback about the impact that's had, whether it's benefited, whether it's made no difference. I think people tell her it's made a difference face to face because they feel more empowered and understand, but is there somewhere where she can access that information?
Yeah, not right at this very moment, but one of the things that we're working on under the medicines optimisation work is to try and bring some measurement into this. And there are two things that I think would help the scenario that you've just described. One is, at the moment, we don't currently systematically measure how much of that activity community pharmacies do. So what I'd like to be able to do, I'd like to be able to sort of sit nationally and say, that pharmacy there isn't providing any of these services, and you live in that area and you're not getting the benefit of that. And I'd like to be able to map that out. And at the moment, the data's there, but not in a way that I can look at that. The other area, which I think is specifically about feedback to the professionals providing those services, and I've seen some of those pharmacists in action, and they do an incredible job, and those patients that receive that do so much better, and are kind of work with their pharmacist, and it's great to see. What we've got at the moment, you've heard about the Friends and Family Test for hospitals. We also conduct what's called a patient questionnaire in community pharmacies, and what we're trying to do is think about how we bring those two together. So again, we would have a measure across the country of all community pharmacies to understand how well their patients value them. And then finally, the other thing I'd just like to add in, we've got hospital pharmacy colleagues here. The scenarios both of you that have described, come about, and you perhaps have a spell in hospital, or you certainly go into hospital for that specialist care. What we'd really like to do is link up the hospital with the community pharmacy, so that when you're discharged from hospital, the pharmacist that you routinely go to knows that you've just come out of hospital, knows that you've probably just had quite a tough time, and then can sit with you and work through the medicines. And if we could bring all that together, which is exactly what we're trying to do, then we'll be in a better position than we perhaps are today.
We've got time for one more question. So, the front here.
Hi there. My name is Eileen Callahan. I'm a chief pharmacist to work in Croydon in a clinical commissioning group. And we commission quite a number of medicines optimisation services. And I think it's been really valuable to hear the patient perspective on this. And we did a local clinical patient engagement piece around a referral system that you just described, where people were in hospital, got new medicines, and were referred out to their local community pharmacy for onward care. Interesting feedback from the patients was, actually, I expect to leave the hospital with all the tools in the box that I need for my onward care. And we had to do a lot of work to explain to patients that actually, what you learn in an acute situation may not stick. And actually 2 weeks later when you go home, you're thinking, I wish I'd asked that question. And it's to refer you on to a pharmacist who will have all that information as to what happened to you in hospital and what happened to your medicines. So I think it is a huge piece of work we need to do around patients understanding what pharmacists can offer, but more importantly, linking as that gentleman said, the GP, because I think that will help the patients feel safe and feel that actually value in the community pharmacy. You feel actually you're going somewhere that the GP trusts and they understand and they're talking to each other. It's not just another person who doesn't really understand. So then I suppose for us it's the linking of those electronically as well as, you know, I don't envy your role because there are so many things we need to fix in this pathway, as well as the public perception of what we can do.
Could I just ask Paula to sort of say whether, just as we close, whether the industry has a desire to help with some of this, with some of these sort of pretty fundamental things, from availability of services through to promoting that professional collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, well, I hope, just by sort of some of the examples of what I've shown today, I mean, very much so, because for all the reasons I've said, we're very much on this agenda, and I think, you know, there's a lot of grassroots examples now through the medicines optimisation programme we ran, where it was directed to patients to tell them to go to their pharmacist. It forced the pharmacist to get the materials to talk to their patients, to more strategic work that we operate in at a local level, very much. And I think for me the power of this, you know, is the common, getting the right people around a table and having a conversation. And I think industry sometimes has a real role in forming partnerships and facilitating. And we do have that role because we have a lot of connections, a lot of, you know, the whole sort of multidisciplinary teams that exist. And I think even at that level, without getting too clever at a strategic level, is a place where we can drive immediate implementation. Because I think my fear is that the guidelines and everything is so far away, and we need to be making this happen now.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is a session being organised for November.
Yeah.
You know, we'll make sure that the right people are there, if people are interested in coming, to be able to sort of begin to have that discussion. So I think we should stop. Otherwise, I'll get told off. And I'll blame the people who were in advance of us. So it's a short question and answer session, but I won't do that to their faces. So for a variety of reasons. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for participating.